Welcome to Millennials Meet Liberty, your source for searing hot libertarian takes on the world's weekly headlines. Here's your host, Colt Thompson.
Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to episode 3 of Millennials Meet Liberty with your host, Colt Thompson. We are right back at it. I'm going to try to get into the weekly routine, shooting on every Friday. Hopefully, when and if I get better at this, a little more lively, get some more people on board other than myself, maybe 2 or 3 times a week. But right now, we're just going to stick with weekly because I'm getting my feet wet and working my way through this podcast. So what I really wanted to devote today's episode to today was all about the Trump presidency and how libertarians should look at it thus far. So Trump hit the stage 2.5 years ago. We're closing in on 3 full years in the Oval Office. His inauguration date, I believe, was in January of 2017. Hard to believe it's almost 2020 at this point. And the election for next year is heating up. Obviously, Trump has declared his candidacy with no real opponent in the elephant side of the aisle. And then the Dems have a litany of candidates promoting utter nonsense and stupidity. But I'm not here to talk about that right now and that sheer circus. I'm going to devote this episode, like I said, to tear apart the Trump presidency as it pertains to things that he has done that have been bad or what his administration has done that's been bad, and then maybe even the lack thereof. And then the issues, I guess, where he has, made some positive progress, so to speak. So I will start with the positives of the Donald Trump presidency in the eyes of a libertarian. So there's plenty of good content to talk about here. Plenty of good content. So the first thing I'll really look at when I talk about the positives is something that hits you right in the face when you think about Donald Trump, whether you like him or dislike him, is his proclivity to not care about political correctness. He himself is a totally anti-PC guy, and that truly is an embodiment of the First Amendment rights we have in this country. I think a lot of people could say that it's refreshing to have somebody in the Oval Office who's not just a stuffed suit and who's not professorial like Obama or lying through their teeth like many other politicians are, twisting and manipulating their verbiage to project a message of seriousness, relevancy, and honesty when it's generally the furthest thing from that. So it's good to get the direct feedback from President Trump's mouth in that bully pulpit where you think you know where he stands. Just because he says funny things and he's cutthroat and speaks his mind doesn't necessarily mean he's honest or even understands what he's talking about. But the elimination of political correctness has just been absolutely hilarious. And for people who don't see it that way, I'm sorry. I understand it's not professional, but at the end of the day, we're only going to advance as a society if we can be honest, and there's nothing wrong with putting forth some humor in that light. So political correctness, that's just a made-up, wonky, stupid thing that the left, I guess, is cared about for whatever reason. I truly don't understand that, other than they just don't agree with him. They don't like his style. It just rubs them the wrong way. So ditching the whole political correctness thing is, I don't know, if you believe in democracy, it's a really good way to tap into the electorate who are pretty much just ordinary, normal people living their life who don't mind some candor and a sense of humor. So I think exercising your First Amendment right and doing away with political correctness is great. In fact, hilarious. And I love following him on Twitter and all of his other social media accounts. And as a libertarian, who cares if someone's speaking their mind? Everybody has natural individual rights. Go to town, buddy. That's as far as I'm concerned. So I guess moving beyond that, the anti-political correct nature of Donald Trump, that's just him more of a person. But again, it's an embodiment of his presidency because he's speaking on behalf of the public day in and day out, whether it's with world leaders or just with whomever he interacts with. But moving beyond that, another good thing I would say, and it's something that the media is tried to spin as something that should cause heated tensions, and that's his interaction with foreign leaders. So for what it's worth, Donald Trump is he's been a preeminent, stereotypical, quintessential businessman. I mean, he's had his failures and shortcomings. We all know that. The best way to earn a small fortune is to whittle away at a big one that he inherited from his father. But despite these things, he is a very successful marketer, and the Trump campaign was all about marketing, and being relatively business savvy lends itself well to the chief executive position in the United States, in the White House. And when you're interacting with people at a top level, it is what it is. It's politics. And being able to interact with people who are perceived as enemies by the media is a great thing, because the media is out there to divide people, whether you know it or not. Libertarians see directly into that. Him meeting with Kim Jong-un is absolutely earth-shattering. It's a great thing. I mean, the people of North Korea are totally oppressed. And for him to do that is phenomenal. It sheds lights on what's going on there, and the criminality of everything, and the brute, terrible nature. Because in order to defeat the beast, you got to get into the belly of the beast, and we can do those in a peaceable way. Everything can be handled through conversation when you're dealing with rational people, and Kim Jong-un is not rational, but his actions and the actions of his children will speak for themselves as years to come. And the North Korea situation, I have no idea, could resolve itself, but it's good for us to put our best foot forward and try to make peace with these people and show them the way we do things, not go over there and be pricks and be hostile in the South China Sea. So then the other part of this is him interacting with Vladimir Putin. Again, I mean, people want to portray him as the enemy of the United States and let's have Cold War 3.0, but it's just really childish and dangerous and awful to make all those accusations and assumptions, and with the interference in the elections. I mean, most people interfering in the elections to the biggest degree were the social media outlets. It was here in our own country based out of Silicon Valley. So the idea that they're going to pin that on the Russians is pretty funny and cheeky. But at the end of the day, they have a pretty good grip, the United States, that is, on democracy and vote counting. So again, the media wants nothing more than Trump to develop foes, which is just scary and ugly, because it's like, why would you want to mess around with a pseudo world power in Russia? It just doesn't make any sense. I mean, anytime you can extend an olive branch as a president of the United States, debatably the most powerful nation on earth because of our sheer military size, and I'll get to that a little bit later. I mean, you got to develop those relationships. It's a great thing. That's what we want to see as libertarians. We want peace. We don't want war. So the few things I've talked about thus far is the political correctness and then interactions with foreign leaders, namely Vladimir Putin and Kim Jong-un. Those are great things. And we all damn well know, had those interactions taken place by a Democrat, they would probably be considered treasonous by Republicans, but at the same time, they would be brought down from on high and talked about in such a beautiful light by the media that if someone like Barack Obama or Joe Biden or one of those types, hell, even Hillary Clinton did that they would be praised like no other for promoting peace. And we all know Barack Obama got a Nobel Peace Prize for absolutely nothing other than continuing the campaign of bombing, murdering, and ruining the lives of people in the Middle East. So Donald Trump definitely chalks up a victory in that category. So the good, Trump, non-politically correct, Russia, interactions with Russia and North Korea. Going further, maybe smaller victories, depending on what your take is on these things. I mean, people's opinions of these things are all subjective at the end of the day. Some things matter more than others, and that's what we recognize as libertarians. But the right to try law, bill, I don't even know exactly what it was, but the idea that Trump is open-minded and had a document on his desk mentioning right to try and enabling, I guess, freeing up people with terminal illnesses to utilize drugs that they otherwise would not have been able to, would have been barred by the FDA. If I have this information correct, that's a great thing. I mean, that is undeniably moral. It's excellent. The idea that you're on your deathbed and you need to exhaust all options, and you don't want that barrier from your own government giving you the chains and shackles not to do that. I mean, that is just a grand slam. So that's a small step in the right direction. And it's better than people flying to a foreign country just to experiment with some of these drugs. I mean, part of the built-in cost of doing that is the actual flight. And then above and beyond that's the cost of the drugs overseas. Get it in the U.S. and let people go to town on it. It's just common sense. If you're facing death, you need to be able to exhaust all options. I mean, what kind of inhumane society was the U.S. living in that wasn't even allowed or permissible? What a joke. So kudos to Donald Trump on that as well. Moving on down to, I'll talk about hemp, I guess. I mean, people don't really know the distinctions between hemp and cannabis in this country if you ask the layman. But simply put, cannabis is two plants, sativa and indica, and hemp is really its own thing. And forget about decriminalizing marijuana is the hot button topic. Hemp, on the other hand, has multitude of uses, is being legalized across many states as it is. And Trump managed to sneak that in the Farm Bill a couple of years ago. I think it was a year and a half that he signed. Now, signing the bill was not a good thing, and I'll explain that later and extrapolate upon that later in the podcast. But the fact that he wove in the hemp legalization in that bill is incredible. I mean, like I said, hemp has multiple good uses. You can extract CBD oil from that. And with that CBD oil, that doesn't necessarily mean there's THC in it, because this has nothing to do with cannabis. Again, it's hemp. But CBD, we all know, is a natural painkiller and can alleviate stress and fatigue and anxiety and really help loosen up those joints, much like an ibuprofen, but without swallowing a pill and ruining your gut. So again, libertarian-esque Donald Trump in that way, helping us out, right to try. That's what we want. Ultimately, a libertarian wants a world where all drugs and all substances on planet Earth or in the universe are able to be consumed free of government manipulation or telling us what to do. So good on the PC stuff, great on the interactions with the foreign countries, excellent on the right to try, and furthermore, excellent on the hemp situation. And ideally, and this would take a lot more of a podcast to go into this, but I mean, we don't want to tax and regulate hemp or cannabis or any of these things. A lot of people quickly say, oh yeah, this is great because we can tax it. No, who cares about taxing it? I get it. They built 5 public schools in Colorado with the tax money. Okay, that's great, whatever. But ultimately, without taxing any of it, you can still create oodles of jobs, which spills over into the people, getting the paychecks and spending them in the economy and building their own life or starting their own business or whatever they want to do. We don't need to derive tax receipts from that just as if that's the only good thing. The good thing is the individual liberty doing what you want, and then the business enterprise that's born out of that. That's what libertarians look at. Taxing, it's nothing we really care about. We don't want that to happen. That's just unnecessary. Legalize it, done. Not legalize, regulate, and tax. Fuck all of that. Legalize it, bang. Another thing Donald Trump did that is libertarian-esque. Again, there's a distinction between thick libertarianism and thin libertarianism. Thick libertarianism would basically mean we want to explode the government right now, blow it all up and start from scratch, and the chips fall where they may. Thin libertarianism is more of an incremental viewpoint where we want to chip and whittle away at the government in order to unencumber us from the issues the government gives us day in and day out. So I guess as far as incrementalism is concerned and thin libertarianism, Donald Trump repealing the Obamacare mandate was definitely good from a libertarian angle. I mean, we still have that monstrosity of Obamacare, but at least if you're not buying insurance, you're not getting fined. And by fine, I mean a major fine in the tune to thousands of dollars per year, which much Americans cannot. I would say over half Americans can't even come up with that if you ask that for them. Most of them are reliant on a tax refund of some sort at the end of the year. They build that into their budget mentally without even thinking about it. Subconsciously, they need that money. So if you checked with any local representative H&R Block, they're telling you damn well that no one's paying that Obamacare penalty. I mean, they were going to use the IRS to siphon that money out of people's pockets one way or another, whether it was garnishing wages or not, but nobody was paying it. And to the extent that they were paying it, it was basically punishment, especially if you're wealthier or well off or young and you can just afford certain medical expenses out of pocket without being insured. Nothing I would recommend, but those are scenarios that are accurate. While the rest of Obamacare stays in place, that's where I have an issue with Trump, and we can talk about that a little bit later. But by and large, getting rid of that mandate is thin libertarianism. That's incrementalism. That's moving the needle in the right direction. Is it the biggest, most exciting thing in the world that Trump's ever done in the eyes of libertarian? Fuck no. But is it a good thing? Yeah, definitely. I'll take liberty any angle I can get it, any crevice I can get it. Just thinking again out loud about more good things. I think I got one more really that came to mind, and that was the justices situation on the Supreme Court. So really, really looking at it, 99.9% of the laws and bills and cases, everything that just gets gummed up in the Supreme Court, which ends up becoming some sort of case law precedent, always deviates from the intentions of the Constitution. So you're never getting a real constitutionalist view on most of these things that hit the court. So it's cool to get some justices who are quasi-good, because if you have runaway justices like Ruth Bader Ginsburg, the left's hero, you're going to be in for a horrible outcome. And that could be a resounding impact over the next 10, 20, 30, 40 years. I mean, it's going to accelerate our deterioration as a nation economically. And again, we'll probably just end up unraveling, and the free market will fix a lot of the issues some of these bonehead laws create. But why do we want to go through that suffering? I mean, it's probably inevitable, but at the end of the day, if we can ward it off with a few good justices who are quasi-constitutionalists and have some common sense and respect individual liberty, it's a great thing. And the two justices Trump was fortunate enough to appoint, and I definitely mean fortunate because it's odd that he was able to appoint two, and hell, he might even have three if he's elected a second term, with the health status of Ruth Bader Ginsburg, which I would never wish anything bad on. But you got to ask yourself, it begs the question, is someone in their upper 70s, mid 80s, is that really appropriate for someone to be sitting on the Supreme Court bench? I mean, practically speaking, I mean, why is it a lifetime appointment? Why are we going to have people suffer and be hung in political balance? It's just the scary, creepy thing about government in general that those type of things even happen. I mean, put a cap on it for Christ's sake. But the age that is, who knows? But he nominated and got confirmed Neil Gorsuch out of Colorado and Brett Kavanaugh. His name slipped me for a second, and that was obviously a huge fiasco and circus. And I have my opinions on that. But largely, Neil Gorsuch was a bit in the mold of Antonin Scalia, his predecessor, and probably arguably one of the best guys on the court right now with Clarence Thomas, if we're talking constitutionality and individual liberty and respect for the Constitution in general. So yeah, that was a home run, and he had a pretty clean rap sheet beforehand, and there wasn't a lot of dirt to dig up, so it was a seemingly easy process to what is pure Kavanaugh faced subsequently. But Gorsuch, pretty rock solid in a lot of these issues. I know a lot of people brought up the frozen trucker story. I'm not going to get into that, but pretty irrelevant. I mean, the guy was definitely a cause for good. It was good to get somebody in there who is practicing judicial prudence and not judicial activism, dispassionately applying the law, just a really solid candidate. And as Peter Schiff's father would say, that the Constitution's not written in Chinese. It's black and white, it's in English. It was meant to be interpreted and understood by the layman. And Gorsuch means and interprets to understand it as a layman. He gets it. It registers with him, by and large. Everybody has different opinions on those things, but you can definitely say he's a good guy. Brett Kavanaugh, on the other hand, not quite as, right of center. I wouldn't say hardcore because Gorsuch is just there. I mean, it's Constitution. It's not hardcore if you're following it. But he's not as hardcore Kavanaugh per se. And the circus that ensued from all of that nomination proceedings was definitely entertaining. How can you not laugh? I mean, that woman getting up there and everyone tweeting out and hashtagging believe women. I mean, that's just a horrible thing to say. I mean, the gravity of the situation and what was going on, of course, is extremely serious. But to just presupposing someone's guilty when a woman comes forward after 35 years of a foggy story that happened in high school, you got to give this guy some credit for hanging in there. I mean, that's a horrible thing to happen at the pinnacle of your career. Someone to come out of the closet and garner all this attention. And she also just, I'm going on a diatribe here, but she set a terrible example for young women that you need to be haunted by something like that your entire life. Because again, she admitted it wasn't full-on rape. There was no naked situation. And for all I know, nothing happened. But to the extent of what she said happened, it's really bad that women would go through their life for 30 years and be married and have a family and be that shooken up about it that they kind of needed to cause that much of a fiasco, which obviously makes the whole situation political. And it's just disgusting. I mean, and Kavanaugh had a right to be furious while he was speaking about those things, but just digressing from that for a moment, probably more of a George Bush type nominee there, not really I don't want to say Donald Trump, but not really a libertarian constitutional type, conservatarian type pick. But again, right of center and moving the needle, thin libertarianism, just making sure we have someone a little bit more in our camp towards liberty than someone else in the wrong direction. So if Trump is able to get a third person and swing the balance of the court, we're going to see the Democrats try to pack the court and go all ape shit. And I don't know. I mean, every situation in my life, and I'm just spitballing right now. I mean, that's by and large everything that I think Trump's accomplished that have been relatively good as a libertarian and through my eyes. But just thinking about the constitutionality of some laws, but just in life, Like any law or policy or procedure that's written, or any game, if there's referees or any sport, I don't know how with a straight face people can change the rules in order to get what they want and act as if that's like moral and okay. It's not. I mean, the Constitution's very simple and straightforward. I'm not a constitutionalist thumper, but it is. It is nothing tricky about it. I mean, the 10th Amendment basically spells out that anything not identified in the previous 9 are to be handled by the states. So nationalizing healthcare, education, any other crazy proposal some Democrat wants to put forth, it's not constitutional. There's no argument for it. The idea that like law schools are debating and showing students that there needs to be a debate around these things, that's awful. That's just like bastardization of the profession. If you're an engineer, you're not debating about whether or not 2 + 2 is 4. I mean, that's how clear this stuff is. There are debates and arguments with some cases that toe the line of constitutionality, but not nationalizing healthcare or education or creating administrative agencies out of thin air or just walking all over the rights of people. It just doesn't make any sense. So I really have a distaste for people who like say fuck the Constitution and the light. They want to just impose more laws all over the United States and every state they're in. It's really twisted. Why would people want to manipulate people's life that much? It's weird. It's why I'm a libertarian. It's like, my God, leave people alone. The people in New York State don't care and don't need to care about people in California and vice versa. Any scenario across the country. It's irrelevant. Why turn it into a big fight? Why escalate to the Supreme Court? And then why can't the lemmings in the Supreme Court break from all of the political nonsense and just realize most of the shit they see before them is not constitutional? Strike it the fuck down. Be done. But above and beyond that, I've spent 22 minutes or so now speaking about the pros of Donald J. Trump, DJT number 45, as they say. But I'm going to go into some of the bad stuff too, because I want to be even keel about this and just speak as a true libertarian. So bad things. I'm just not going to go in order right now. I'm just going to bounce around, see whatever hits my head. I think one thing that would jump out is his relationship with the media. And I don't care if it's adversarial or he's even yelling at them. I don't really care. I mean, it's kind of embarrassing, I guess, but for me, I think it's funny. What I care about is when he lies to the media, because that's just kind of awkward. It's like, why do you got to do that, man? Just be honest, tell the truth, keep your mouth shut if you don't want to tell the truth, but just don't talk. I guess a few examples would just be how he's boasting about the economy all the time and how great it is. Now it's the greatest economy in the world. Like, bro, it's not even accurate at all. People like to point towards the 50s and 60s as the most productive and prosperous economy in American history, which is not. It's close. It's probably number 2. I mean, it's really debatable. There's a lot of numbers that can be shifted around. It's definitely number 2, if that. But number 1 would probably be the Gilded Age in the late 1800s, when we really went through a period of industrialization and the Industrial Revolution, where the private sector basically lifted millions of people out of poverty. Immigrants of all different walks of life with speaking different languages just lifted them directly out of poverty through capital investment in the United States and manufacturing and allowing many immigrants to come in. So those 2 periods, the period after World War II and the Gilded Age, which gilded means, everything covered in gold, those are the 2 periods where we were killing it, crushing it in the United States. And subsequently, over the past half a century, we've just completely gone off the rails, i.e. government spending, debasing our currency, going off the gold standard, ramping up deficits, all these things. But so when he lies about that, that's just kind of like, dude, you're just completely lying. You're just trying to build yourself up and project this message on people who will believe it, because economists are relatively stupid these days in the mainstream. And that goes off onto the electorate and they'll want to reelect him. And that's what his goal is. But I don't know. I just don't feel good when people do that, because I myself work in manufacturing and I just know what the outlook is. And I see people going paycheck to paycheck and they're not any better off. So I know they're not believing that and being force fed that. It's a joke. So that's probably bad, the lying to the media. Above and beyond that as well, just signing one monster spending bill after another. So if he's campaigning on the idea that the country's bankrupt and the economy sucks and that the taxes are too high and we're in too much debt and we're too overregulated, the spending bills that hit your desk as president shouldn't be signed. I think he has decent senses. I think he signed one and said he would never do it again, but then he keeps doing it. Any opportunity he has to bloat the military because that's the only people within the federal government who like him, or bloat up the education system or bloat up the welfare system, he just does it. Does not care. Wants to be seen as the master negotiator and businessman to reach across the aisle. And I can't say I'm surprised because he was a registered Democrat most of his life. He flip-flopped. So he doesn't have a real sense or political theory or grounding guiding him. It's just more like willy-nilly, let's get this thing down. Let's get something accomplished. That's all I want to do. I want to get something done. And to him, getting something done means signing monster spending bills. And you're just ballooning the deficits, piling on debt for generations to come, printing out money in gobs, and devaluing the currency. And everyone's taking a haircut year in and year out. It's not going to get any easier. The price of goods will go up. Your paycheck purchasing power will go down. So yes, signing these spending bills, that's a big no-no. Libertarians should hate that. In addition to that, he's making these tax cuts. And on principle, yes, we should like a tax cut. I don't give a single fuck what kind it is. If it's property, sales, income, corporate, whatever, we really, truly should desire those things. We don't want people taking income from anybody for any reason. But it's kind of doubly bad when you do that and you start racking up more on the national credit card. So he's done one good thing, but you kind of blow it all apart when you rack up 10 times as much spending as you do that little minuscule haircut in your income tax. Bringing the corporate tax down, I don't even know what the effect that has. Some of these things take years to play out, maybe sometimes months, but it's a net good. But the bad things I'm talking about, again, are just the monster spending with the tax cuts as part of that. It's not good. It's bad. It leads to these exploding deficits and that monster amount of debt I was talking about. And that really brings me into more of the issues I have with Donald Trump, because this really plays into the Federal Reserve. And as libertarians know, the Federal Reserve is our enemy. They're basically public enemy number one. They are not private, as they were initially sought out to be. They have a direct relationship with private banks who, control the money supply in a backhanded fashion. The Federal Reserve always has their ears and eyes on the pulse of Wall Street and Wall Street earnings. So the Federal Reserve is just a monster. They're rogue. They do what they want. They institute these quantitative easing programs or these quantitative tightening programs or manipulate interest rates. And the bad things I'm talking about is Donald Trump is basically publicly shouting at them, which is hilarious because he knows his economy is on thin ice. And it's not as good as he makes it out to be. And he's hoping to preserve it before this next election. And then if it goes to hell, then, well, what does he care? His legacy is he got elected twice and he was a winner. Hardy har har. But he senses the truth. And some of the mainstream is finally picking up on the yield curve inverting and the economy going in the wrong direction. And that makes me think people need to scoop up precious metal stocks. And this is a libertarian thing, by the way. And, foreign stocks and foreign currencies, something that will hopefully mitigate you and guard you from impending collapses or economic downturn or stagflation. Anything that could happen. I'm going off on a tangent here, but my point is him being able to just yell at the Federal Reserve and demand lower interest rates and quantitative easing, that's absurd. I mean, the United States needs none of that. We need higher interest rates. We need slashing the size of government. We need savings. We don't need as much consumption. We need investment in actual factories and warehouses and productive enterprise. So Donald Trump yelling at the Federal Reserve and blaming them for issues in the stock market or impending disasters economically, it's a no-no, buddy. It's not a good look. We want to get rid of the Federal Reserve. Being libertarians, that's what we want to do. Nix them completely. Let the market set interest rates. Let people save and invest on their own. Hit the half-hour mark of this podcast. Still a couple more bad things I want to touch on. I'm trying to get through a lot. Just because I want to give you guys a real buckshot view of libertarianism and its central tenets as it pertains to the Trump presidency and what we do and what we don't like. So another thing we do not like is really the whole the mishires. I mean, hiring one swamp creature after another is just a terrible look. When Donald Trump took office, he had a heavy task on his hands. He had a lot of people who were holdovers from the Obama administration within all towers of government. Outside of the military, every aspect of government has people who lean left heavily, and they all want to see him fail. Every agency wants to see him fail, especially when he hints at defunding them a little bit or leaning them out or whatever, cutting their budget or delegitimizing their purpose and role, which there isn't much of any that's created by the government, a lot of these people anyway. And this is not a shot at people who work for the government. It's just a shot at the organizations in and of themselves. But when you hire someone like John Bolton, and I don't care about the other casualties, like the press secretaries, all these things, because those are just kind of like stupid jobs, if you ask me. But when you're hiring someone like John Bolton, National Security Advisor, whatever his title was, I mean, the guy is an absolute warmonger, warhawk, bloodthirsty asshole who, if there is a hell, will be rotting in hell, surely, for everything that he's advocated for in the Middle East in terms of offensive striking and wars and drone carnage and just bombs in general, just terrible. So Trump has good senses. I said the inner businessman in him knows, don't go to war with people. Don't fight with people until you absolutely have to. Make peace with people. Be productive. Form these relationships. It only helps you. Even though he's not a free trade guy, that's something else that's bad about him, the tariffs. I can get to that later. But come on, man. If you want to drain the swamp, don't hire swamp creatures. He's getting advice from dozens and dozens of people because he has these relationships and people want to get in his ear and secure prominent roles within his administration. But dude, come on. It's not a resume building contest with who threw the most bombs and killed the most people in the Middle East. What it should be is who is level-headed, has diplomatic experience that espoused peace across the world or whatever continent or country this diplomat was dealing with. I mean, Rand Paul would be an incredible candidate, one of the few libertarian-esque people in politics. Yeah, make him the national security advisor. Be bold. Fuck some military warhawk, numbnuts idiot like John Bolton. Is terrible. And that's why the guy got sacked, because Trump's instincts were the polar opposite of his. And he finally came to recognize that after making the hire, because you're just a buffoon. You're not doing your due diligence, especially when you're pouring billions into the military annually. You got to wake up and make good decisions and surround yourself with people who are there to make healthy decisions, productive decisions, peaceable decisions. Going further on this topic too is not pulling the troops out of Afghanistan and Yemen and other random countries like Germany and Kosovo and geez Louise, I'm just thinking of all these random ass South American countries. I think we have over 100 military installations nationwide. I mean, why are there troops anywhere outside of the United States? I don't know. I really don't know. I'm not a military guy, but I have zero idea. It's some fabricated utter nonsense. I mean, libertarians get that. There's just no reason for these military people to be all over the world. And especially in the areas where they're killing people. People born in the beginning of the Afghanistan invasion are still, they're able to fight and serve right now. That's awful. It's the longest war in U.S. history. And for what purpose? What are we accomplishing? Other than flushing money down the fucking drain and killing people. Get them out. Ron Paul said it right. When asked what he would do in the Middle East, he said, we marched right in, we can march right out. Bingo. Pretty simple. It's not simplistic or being a Neanderthal to think we can just leave. It's just what like a good person does. And there is a concept called blowback where if you cause a lot of harm in the Middle East, it will probably come back and bite you. Hence what terrorists have always done. They don't hate us because of freedom. They hate us because of what we've done to them. And that's the most courageous thing Ron Paul's probably ever said. So yeah, there probably will be some blowback by the time we leave Afghanistan because we're causing so much strife there and pain and agony. But that's fine. Suck it up. Be the Department of Defense. Get our borders taken care of if that's what you care about. So not libertarian-esque keeping troops in Afghanistan and all these other countries. Boy, I could go on to this list for hours, but I'm going to spare you guys that. Just a couple other things too. I don't even know. I mean, I cannot keep talking because I could spend hours on this. So I'm going to mention talking up the stock market. I've already said that. It's a big no-no. Breathing life into something, blowing the bubble big isn't going to help us in 2, 3, 4 years. His stances on what it appears to be vaping and red flag laws for guns, not good. So libertarians, again, you want to be able to consume any substance, inhale any substance, leave the vaping market alone. And people like to point out, like all these socialists, oh, the people getting sick are the black market individuals because they're not allowed to purchase some of these things anyway. Well, black markets arise because government made something illegal. If everything's out in the open, there's no such thing as a black market anymore. Just economics. You're not going to be able to get rid of a black market when you criminalize something. Let it be out in the open. Common sense. And then the red flag laws, I mean, why would Trump or anyone who calls himself a Second Amendment advocate think that's okay? Everybody has crazy neighbors. So if your crazy neighbor comes over because they had a small altercation with you and they blow you into the cops and say you need your guns removed, that in itself is a red flag law. That's just opening up a Pandora's box of just stupid instances where police officers, law enforcement need to invade your property and seize your self-defense mechanisms. My God, nobody should be in favor for that. Fuck that. And states like New York have already sort of enacted them, and it's just a shame. I mean, it's just, we'll talk about a police state, and that's why the state's just suffering and going directly into hell, and people are leaving because of shit like that. And then I just want to weave into the whole natural disaster spending. While natural disasters are awful, I don't see why, the United States doesn't even budget for these things in a year. That's a little known fact. So Trump's always throwing money hand over fist to some of these areas. And more often than not, there's pork barrel spending that has nothing to do with the disaster, and it's multiple states away that are receiving these funds. So they're easy grab bags for politicians in Congress to vote for and want Trump to sign. So he just needs to be a little more focused on where money and resources are going for disaster relief, which, again, the Constitution didn't authorize any of this. Private sector can take care of disaster relief better than the government can any day. And then finally, I guess the whole, as it pertains to the military spending, we need to slash our military more than in half. I think our military is bigger than the top 10 combined beneath us in sheer size globally. But the Space Force, like, give me a break, adding the 5th or /6th branch of the military to combat aliens. I mean, I could do a comedy sketch on that. I mean, why? I mean, it's 2019. I guess it's trendy to be futuristic and think about exploration into unknown areas, but I think the bad guys are on this rock called Earth until we see a couple up there. And at that point, if we see someone, they probably have a little bit more technology than we do or will ever have to kill us if that's their goal. Because if someone can find their way to Earth, which is not their natural organic environment, they got to be pretty fucking smart, probably millenniums ahead of us as far as technological advancement. So we don't need a Space Force. What we need is to slash the size of the military, the size of government, and really take hard line steps in the direction of liberty. Because that is what this country was predicated on. That's what it's all about. I love living in the United States because of liberty. I do not like living here because of things Donald Trump does. Not just Donald Trump, but just government in its own right. Because it doesn't matter who the puppet master is. The puppets are still going to do what they're going to do. And spending, reckless warfare, assault on individual liberties and rights is just fucked up and immoral. And it's good to know that when I hit my deathbed someday, I knew the entire time that I was fighting for what was right, what was humane, and really advanced human progress and the human experience. And that's all I got in this episode of Rambling, LOL. Mash that button to follow me on my social media accounts, and I'll see you next week for episode 4. Thank you.